The morning Olivia Turner realized she would rather die than marry Marcus Greaves was the same morning she found dried blood on her bedroom doorknob and remembered it was her own. She stood at her wash basin in the pale dawn light of April 1885, her fingers trembling as she dabbed cold water against the bruise blooming purple along her jaw. 3 days. That was all the time left before her father would walk her down the aisle of Our Ray's small church and hand her over to a man whose eyes held nothing but cruelty and possession. The mountain town of Our Ray, Colorado, had been her home for 22 years, nestled in a box canyon surrounded by towering peaks still capped with winter snow. She had always loved the way the morning sun painted the red rocks gold, but now those mountains felt like prison walls closing in. Her father, Daniel Turner, owned the largest silver mine in the San Juan Mountains, and Marcus Greaves owned the land rights to expand it. The arrangement had been simple business to her father. Olivia was the currency that would make both men richer. She had tried to tell her father what Marcus was really like, how he had grabbed her wrist hard enough to leave fingerprint bruises when no one was looking, how he spoke to her like she was property he had already purchased, how he had cornered her in the hallway last night and struck her when she flinched away from his kiss. Her father had told her she was being dramatic. A woman needed a firm hand, he said. Marcus would provide well for her. She pressed the wet cloth against her face and closed her eyes. The wedding dress hanging on her wardrobe seemed to mock her with its ivory silk and delicate lace. Her mother would have never allowed this, but her mother had died giving birth to a stillborn son when Olivia was 15, and her father had slowly transformed from a loving parent into a man who saw her as nothing more than a business asset. The sound of horses in the street below drew her to the window. The sun was barely up, casting long shadows across the muddy main road. A lone rider was leading his horse toward the livery stable, his movements unhurried despite the early hour. Even from the second story of her father's house, she could see he was tall, his shoulders broad beneath a worn leather vest. His hat was pulled low, but something about the way he moved caught her attention. There was a carefulness to him, a awareness of his surroundings that suggested he was accustomed to trouble. She watched him disappear into the stable, then turned back to her room. What did it matter? In 3 days she would be Mrs. Marcus Greaves, and whatever freedom she had left would be gone forever. She had thought about running, of course. She had thought about it every day since her father had announced the engagement 6 months ago. But where would she go? She had no money of her own, no relatives who would take her in. Unmarried women did not simply disappear into the wilderness and survive. This was 1885, and a woman alone was vulnerable in ways that terrified her almost as much as Marcus did. Almost. She dressed slowly, choosing a high-necked blouse that would hide the finger marks on her throat. Her father expected her at breakfast, and Marcus would likely be there too. He had taken to joining them for meals, asserting his presence in her home as if he already owned it. As if he already owned her. The dining room was exactly as she feared. Her father sat at the head of the table reading the Our Ray newspaper, his silver hair neatly combed, his expression satisfied. Marcus sat to his right, his thick fingers wrapped around a coffee cup, his small eyes tracking her the moment she entered the room. He was a large man, running to fat in his middle years, his face fleshed and red from too much whiskey. He smiled when he saw her, and the smile made her stomach turn. "There is my bride," he said, his voice carrying the false warmth of ownership. "Come give your intended a proper good morning, Olivia." She forced herself to walk to the table, to allow him to grasp her hand and pull her close enough to kiss her cheek. His breath smelled of cigars and decay. She held herself rigid, waiting for him to release her. "You look pale," he said, his grip tightening on her wrist. "Are you not sleeping well? Perhaps you are nervous about the wedding night." He laughed, and her father chuckled along with him, neither man looking up from his plate. "I am fine," she managed, pulling her hand free. She took her seat across from Marcus, as far from him as the table would allow. The housekeeper brought her tea and toast, but her throat felt too tight to swallow. "The judge confirmed he can perform the ceremony Saturday afternoon," her father said, finally acknowledging her presence. "The reception will be at the hotel. I have invited every mine owner and businessman in the district. This will be the event of the season." "How wonderful," Olivia said flatly. Her father's eyes narrowed at her tone, but Marcus laughed again. "She is spirited, Daniel. I like that. It will make breaking her all the more satisfying." He said it like a joke, but his eyes were not joking. Her father said nothing, returning his attention to his newspaper. Olivia set down her teacup before her shaking hands could betray her. "I need to go to the general store," she said. "I require some items for my trousseau." "Take the housekeeper with you," her father said without looking up. "It would not be proper for you to be seen alone so close to the wedding." "Of course." She stood quickly, desperate to leave the room, to escape Marcus's stare and her father's indifference. She made it to the hallway before Marcus caught her arm, spinning her around to face him. His fingers dug into the same bruises he had left the night before. "You will smile at the wedding," he said quietly, his face close to hers. "You will behave like a grateful bride, or I will make you regret it. Do you understand me?" She wanted to spit in his face. She wanted to claw at his eyes. Instead she nodded, because she had learned that resistance only made him worse. He released her with a shove that sent her stumbling backward into the wall. "Good girl," he said, and walked back into the dining room whistling. She stood in the hallway, her breath coming in short gasps, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might burst. She could not do this. She could not marry this man. She would die first. The thought came to her with sudden clarity. She would rather throw herself off the cliffs outside of town than spend a lifetime being broken by Marcus Greaves. But she did not want to die. She wanted to live. She wanted to be free. The general store was busy with mourning customers when Olivia arrived with Mrs. Chen, the elderly housekeeper who had been with the Turner family for a decade. Olivia moved through the aisles mechanically, selecting thread and buttons she did not need, her mind racing. She had perhaps $20 saved from birthday gifts over the years, hidden in a book in her room. It was not enough to start a new life, but it might be enough to get her to Denver. She could find work there, perhaps as a seamstress or a teacher. It was a desperate plan, barely a plan at all, but it was something. She was examining a bolt of fabric she had no intention of buying when she heard a familiar voice behind her. "Miss Turner, I did not expect to see you here this morning." She turned to find Thomas Brennan, one of her father's mine foremen, smiling at her with his usual friendly warmth. Thomas had always been kind to her, treating her with a respect that most of her father's associates did not bother with. He was perhaps 10 years older than her, married with 3 young children. "Good morning, Mr. Brennan," she said, managing a smile. "Just picking up some necessities before Saturday." His smile faded slightly. "Yes, the wedding. The whole town is talking about it." He hesitated, then lowered his voice. "Miss Turner, forgive me for speaking plainly, but are you certain this is what you want? Some of the men have said things about Mr. Greaves, things that concern me." Tears burned her eyes before she could stop them. She blinked them back furiously, glancing around to make sure no one was listening. "What I want does not matter," she whispered. "My father has made his decision." Thomas's expression darkened. "That is not right. You are not property to be traded. Tell that to my father." She tried to laugh, but it came out broken. "Excuse me, Mr. Brennan, I need to finish my shopping." She fled to the back of the store, pressing her hand against her mouth to hold back a sob. She was falling apart in public, and that was dangerous. If anyone reported her behavior to her father or Marcus, there would be consequences. "You all right, miss?" The voice was unfamiliar, deep and quiet. She spun around to find the cowboy from this morning standing a few feet away, a bag of coffee beans in his hand. Up close, she could see he was younger than she had thought, perhaps 25 or 26, with dark hair that needed cutting and eyes the color of stormy skies. His face was tanned from sun and weather, his jaw shadowed with stubble. There was a gentleness to his expression that surprised her. "I am fine," she said automatically, wiping at her eyes. "Thank you." He did not look convinced, but he nodded slowly. "You did not look fine, if you do not mind my saying. You looked like someone who needs help." She laughed bitterly. "There is no help for my situation. That is usually what people think right before they find a way out." He shifted the coffee bag to his other hand. "I am Lucas Brennan. I am Thomas Brennan's younger brother. Just rode in from Wyoming last night, staying at the boarding house on 5th Street. Olivia Turner." She studied him more carefully, seeing the family resemblance now in the shape of his jaw and the directness of his gaze. "Your brother is a good man." "Best man I know," Lucas agreed. "He sent me a telegram a few weeks back, asked me to come down for a visit, said there was trouble brewing in our ray that might need handling." His eyes held hers. "I am guessing you might be part of that trouble." She should have turned away. She should have collected Mrs. Chen and returned home immediately. Instead, she found herself saying, "My father is forcing me to marry a man who hurts me. The wedding is in 3 days. I have no way out." Lucas's expression did not change, but something hardened in his eyes. "Do you want a way out?" "More than anything." The words tumbled out before she could stop them. "But I have nowhere to go, no money, no way to support myself, and my father would search for me. He would bring me back, and then everything would be worse." "Not if you disappeared proper," Lucas said quietly. "Not if you vanished so completely they could not find you even if they tried." Hope flared in her chest, painful and dangerous. "How?" "I have friends in Wyoming. Good people who would take you in, help you get settled. I could get you there safe, make sure no one follows. You would need a new name, a new story, but you could start over." "Why would you help me? You do not even know me." Lucas's jaw tightened. "When I was 14, my mother tried to leave my father. He was a mean drunk, used his fists more than his words. She made it as far as Denver before he dragged her back. Broke her arm in 3 places to teach her a lesson about obedience." He paused, his voice roughening. "She died 6 months later. The doctor said it was pneumonia, but I always wondered if she just gave up fighting. Thomas got us out right after, raised me himself even though he was barely 20. So yeah, I know what it looks like when a woman needs saving, and I know what happens when no one steps up to help." Olivia felt tears streaming down her face now, but she did not care. "When?" "Tomorrow night." "Can you get out of your house without being seen?" "There is a trellis outside my bedroom window. I can climb down after everyone is asleep." "Do it at 2 in the morning. Bring only what you can carry in a small bag. Wear riding clothes if you have them, and sturdy boots. I will be waiting with horses at the north end of town, past the last house on Canyon Creek." "You know where that is?" She nodded, her heart hammering. "How do I know I can trust you?" "You do not," Lucas said honestly. "You are taking a leap of faith, same as I am. But I am willing to bet your odds are better with me than with a man who leaves bruises on your face." She touched her jaw unconsciously, and his eyes followed the movement. His expression went very cold. "He did that last night, and worse other times." Lucas was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was carefully controlled. 2 in the morning. Do not bring anything valuable that could be traced. No jewelry, no family heirlooms, just clothes and essentials. And Miss Turner, do not tell anyone, not your housekeeper, not a friend, no one. The fewer people who know, the safer you will be. What will happen when they realize I am gone? Leave a note saying you could not go through with the wedding and you have left town. Do not say where. Let them think you went east to stay with relatives. By the time they figure out you did not, we will be long gone. Mrs. Chen appeared at the end of the aisle, calling for Olivia. Lucas stepped back smoothly, tipping his hat like they were strangers who had briefly shared the same space. "Good luck with the wedding, miss," he said loudly enough for the housekeeper to hear. Then, more quietly, 2 in the morning. I will wait until 3. If you do not come by then, I will know you changed your mind. He walked away before she could respond, disappearing into the crowded store. Olivia stood frozen, her mind reeling. Could she really do this? Could she run away in the middle of the night with a stranger, abandon her entire life, become someone new? She thought about Marcus's hands on her throat. She thought about the way her father looked through her like she did not exist. She thought about the wedding dress hanging in her wardrobe like a death shroud. Yes, she could do this. She had to. The next day and a half passed in a blur of wedding preparations and mounting terror. Marcus came to dinner that night, running his hand possessively down her back when her father was not looking, whispering promises in her ear about their wedding night that made her skin crawl. She smiled and nodded and played the role of obedient bride, all while mentally cataloging what she would take with her. 2 changes of clothes, her warmest shawl, the money from her hiding place, a small knife from the kitchen that she could conceal in her boot. A tintype photograph of her mother, the only one she had. She barely slept that night, lying awake and watching the moon track across her window. What if Lucas did not show up? What if this was some cruel joke, or worse, a trap arranged by her father to test her loyalty? But no, she had seen the understanding in Lucas's eyes. He knew what it meant to be helpless. He knew what it cost to escape. The next day Marcus came by with a gift, a heavy gold necklace that looked more like a collar. He fastened it around her throat himself, his fingers lingering on her skin. "So everyone knows who you belong to," he said, and kissed her hard enough to split her lip. Her father, sitting across the room reviewing contracts, said nothing. That night at dinner, her father toasted her upcoming marriage, raising his wine glass with satisfaction. "To Olivia," he said. "May she bring honor to the Turner name and prosperity to our business ventures. Not may she be happy. Not may she find love. Just prosperity and honor, as if she were a prize mare being bred for profit." She excused herself early, claiming a headache. In her room she paced and waited, watching the clock on her mantel tick forward with agonizing slowness. At midnight, she changed into her riding skirt and a simple blouse, layering her warmest coat over top. She braided her hair tightly and pinned it up, then tucked the small bundle of belongings into a canvas bag. Her hands shook as she removed the gold necklace Marcus had given her and left it on her dresser. She would not take anything from him. The note was the hardest part. She sat at her writing desk and stared at the blank paper for long minutes before finally writing, "Father, I cannot marry Marcus Greaves. I have gone to stay with Mother's sister in Boston. Do not look for me. I will not return. Forgive me. Olivia." Her mother's sister had died 3 years ago, but her father might not remember that detail. It would at least send him looking in the wrong direction. At 1:45, she opened her window and looked down at the trellis. It was a long drop to the ground, and the wood looked old and fragile in the moonlight. If she fell, if she made noise, if someone woke up, this would all be over before it began. She had no choice. She climbed out the window. The trellis creaked under her weight but held. She moved as quickly as she dared, her boots finding purchase on the wooden slats, her bag banging against her back. Halfway down her foot slipped, and she hung suspended for a terrifying moment, her fingers burning as they gripped the edge of the trellis. Then she found her footing again and continued down. When her feet finally touched solid ground, she stood frozen, listening for any sound of alarm from the house. Nothing. Just the wind in the cottonwoods and the distant sound of the creek. She ran. The streets of Auray were dark and empty. Most of the buildings shuttered for the night. She kept to the shadows, her heart pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. Every dog bark made her flinch. Every shadow seemed to hide someone watching. But she made it to the edge of town without seeing another soul, following Canyon Creek north past the last scattered houses. And there, just as he had promised, was Lucas Brennan. He stood beside two horses, his own big bay gelding and a smaller gray mare. When he saw her, he moved forward quickly, taking her bag and securing it to the mare's saddle. "You came," he said, and there was relief in his voice. "I was not sure you would." "I was not sure either," she admitted. "But I realized I would rather risk dying free than live as Marcus Greaves' prisoner." "You are not going to die," Lucas said firmly. He helped her mount the mare, his hands steady and impersonal. "But we need to move fast. I want to be 20 miles from here by dawn, and we will need to avoid the main roads." "Where are we going?" "North into Wyoming territory. I have a friend who runs a ranch near Lander. He owes me a favor, and his wife is always looking for help with their children. They will take you in, no questions asked. You will be safe there." She gathered the reins, feeling the mare shift beneath her. "I do not know how to thank you." "Thank me when we are clear of Colorado," Lucas said, swinging up onto his bay. "Let's ride." They left Auray in the dead of night, following narrow trails that wound up into the mountains. Lucas set a hard pace, pushing the horses as fast as the terrain would allow. Olivia clung to the mare's back, her muscles burning from the unfamiliar exercise, her mind still reeling from what she had done. She had left. She had actually left. There was no going back now. The sky was starting to lighten in the east when Lucas finally slowed, guiding them off the trail into a thick stand of aspen trees. "We will rest here for a few hours," he said, dismounting. "Let the horses recover and wait out full daylight. Easier to stay hidden during the day, travel again at dusk." Olivia slid down from the mare, her legs nearly buckling when they hit the ground. Lucas caught her elbow, steadying her. "You did good," he said. "I know that was not easy. I keep thinking I am going to wake up and find this was all a dream," she said. "That I am still in my bedroom and the wedding is tomorrow and none of this is real. It is real." Lucas loosened the cinches on both horses, giving them space to breathe. "You are free of him, Olivia. Whatever happens next, you are free." She wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly shaking. "My father is going to be so angry, and Marcus. Marcus is not going to just let me go. He is going to search for me. He is going to want revenge. Let him search. We will be careful, cover our tracks. I know these mountains better than most, and I have done this before." "Done what?" "Helped women run away from bad marriages. Helped people who needed to disappear." Lucas pulled a canteen from his saddle and offered it to her. "Drink. You need water." She drank gratefully, the cold water soothing her dry throat. "Who are you really, Lucas Brennan? You are not just a cowboy passing through town." He smiled slightly, settling down with his back against a tree trunk. "I am exactly that. But I have also done some bounty hunting, some scouting, some guiding for folks who needed to get from one place to another without being noticed. After Thomas raised me, I spent some years drifting, trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my life. Turned out I was good at finding people who did not want to be found, and helping people who did not want to be found stay hidden. Strange way to make a living, but it suits me. So when your brother asked you to come to our A, he told me about you. Said his boss had a daughter who was being forced into a bad situation and he did not know how to help. Asked if I could come down and see if there was anything to be done. Lucas shrugged. I told him I would look into it. Then I saw you in that store, saw the bruise on your face and the fear in your eyes, and I knew what needed to happen. Olivia sat down on a fallen log, exhaustion crashing over her. I still cannot believe you are doing this for a stranger. We are not strangers anymore, Lucas pointed out. And besides, I told you, I could not save my mother, but I can save you. That has to count for something. They fell silent, listening to the birds begin their morning songs. Olivia felt strange, unmoored from everything she had ever known. Yesterday she had been Olivia Turner, daughter of a mine owner, trapped bride. Today she was just Olivia with no last name and no clear future. It was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. You should try to sleep, Lucas said. I will keep watch. We will move again at dusk. She wanted to argue that she was too wound up to sleep, but the moment she closed her eyes, the exhaustion pulled her under. She woke to Lucas's hand on her shoulder and the sun low in the western sky. Time to go, he said quietly. I heard riders on the trail about an hour ago. Could be miners heading to work, could be a search party. Either way, we need to put more distance between us and our Ray. They rode through the twilight and into the night, following paths that seemed invisible to Olivia's eyes, but that Lucas navigated with easy confidence. He talked as they rode, telling her stories about Wyoming and the ranch where they were headed, describing his friend John and John's wife Mary. They have 4 children, all under 10, he said. Mary has been wanting help for years, but they live so far from any town that it is hard to find someone willing to come out. She will be thrilled to have you, and she does not care about your past. Lots of people out west are running from something. What should I call myself? Olivia asked. I cannot use my real name. Lucas considered this. What name do you want? You can be anyone now, clean slate. She thought about it as they rode, trying on different identities in her mind. Finally she said, Sarah, Sarah. Ward, plain and forgettable. Sarah Ward it is. Lucas glanced back at her. You ready to be someone new? I do not know if anyone is ever ready for that, she admitted, but I will try. They traveled for 3 days, always moving north, staying off main roads and avoiding towns. Lucas proved to be everything he had promised. Careful, capable, and surprisingly easy to talk to. During the long hours in the saddle, he told her about his childhood, the years after his mother's death when Thomas had basically raised him while working 2 jobs to keep them fed. He talked about the odd jobs he had taken, the places he had seen, the people he had helped. In turn, Olivia found herself opening up in ways she never had before, telling him about her mother, about the slow deterioration of her relationship with her father, about the growing dread that had consumed her life since the engagement. Did you ever love him? Lucas asked on the 3rd night. They had made camp in a small canyon, and Olivia was sitting near the fire while Lucas checked the horses. Your father, I mean, before all this. I did, she said softly. When I was young, he was wonderful. He used to take me riding in the mountains, used to tell me stories about the silver strikes and the early days of our Ray. He made me feel like I mattered, like I was more than just someone's future wife. But after my mother died, he changed. It was like he forgot I was a person. I became just another asset to manage. That is not your fault, I know, but it still hurts. She poked at the fire with a stick. What about you? Will you go back to Wyoming after this? Keep drifting? Lucas was quiet for a long moment. I do not know, he finally said. I have been drifting for a long time. Sometimes I wonder if I am running away from something or just running, maybe both. You do not seem like a man who runs from anything. Everyone runs from something. He came to sit beside her, his movements easy. I guess I have been running from the kind of life Thomas has. Settling down, putting roots in one place, building something permanent. It scares me more than anything else I have faced. Why? Because if you build something, you can lose it. If you love people, they can leave. Better to keep moving, keep things light. He smiled, but it did not reach his eyes. At least, that is what I have been telling myself for 10 years. Olivia studied his profile in the firelight, seeing the loneliness beneath the easy confidence. That sounds exhausting. It is, he admitted. But it is safe. So is a cage until it is not. Lucas turned to look at her, something shifting in his expression. You are wiser than you should be. I have had a lot of time to think about cages lately. She pulled her shawl tighter around her shoulders. Thank you, Lucas. For the cage breaking, I mean. For giving me a chance to be something other than what everyone else decided I should be. You are going to do great things, Sarah Ward, he said, using her new name with a small smile. I can feel it. They reached the ranch outside Lander 5 days after leaving Auray. It was a sprawling property tucked into a valley, with a sturdy house and several outbuildings surrounded by mountains that took Olivia's breath away. Mary Brennan was exactly as Lucas had described. Warm, practical, and so busy with her 4 energetic children that she barely asked any questions before embracing Olivia and declaring she was a godsend. John, a quiet man with kind eyes and a firm handshake, simply nodded his welcome and went back to mending fence. Lucas stayed for 2 days, helping John with some repairs and teaching Olivia the basics of the ranch routine. She watched him work, seeing how comfortable he was in this environment, how natural he looked fixing a fence or handling horses. He was good with Mary's children too, patient and playful in turns. It made her wonder what he would be like as a father someday. The thought surprised her. She had known Lucas for barely a week, and yet she found herself noticing things about him she had no business noticing. The way his face softened when he smiled, the careful gentleness of his hands when he helped her down from her horse, the sound of his laugh, rare but genuine. She was being ridiculous. He had saved her life, nothing more. He would leave soon and she would likely never see him again. That was how this was supposed to work. But on his last evening at the ranch, he found her sitting on the porch steps watching the sunset paint the mountains gold and purple. Beautiful out here, he said, settling beside her. Different from Colorado, but just as nice. It is perfect, Olivia agreed. Mary has been so kind, I think I am going to be happy here. Good, that is what I wanted. Lucas twisted his hat in his hands. I will head out tomorrow morning. John has some cattle he needs driven to market in 2 weeks, so I will help with that, then probably drift south for the winter. Back to Colorado? No, too risky with your father and Greaves probably still looking. I was thinking maybe New Mexico or Arizona territory, someplace warm. Olivia felt her chest tighten. She had known he would leave, so why did it hurt so much? Will you ever come back this way? Maybe. John said he could use steady help and I am getting tired of drifting. He glanced at her. Besides, I would want to check on you. Make sure Sarah Ward is settling in all right. I will miss you, she said before she could stop herself. That probably sounds foolish. We barely know each other. But you saved my life, Lucas. You gave me a future. That is not something I am going to forget. I will miss you too, he said quietly, more than I probably should. He stood abruptly, jamming his hat back on his head. I should get some sleep. Early start tomorrow. He was gone before she could respond. The next morning, Lucas rode out with barely a goodbye. just a tip of his hat and a promise to John that he would be back for the cattle drive. Olivia stood on the porch and watched him go, feeling like something important was riding away with him. The weeks that followed settled into a rhythm. Olivia threw herself into work, helping Mary with the children and the house, learning to cook on the big wood stove and mend clothes, and 100 other practical skills her privileged upbringing had not required. She was Sarah Ward now, a widow from Kansas City starting over after losing her husband to typhoid. The story rolled off her tongue easily after the first few tellings. She kept her hair covered and her eyes down when strangers came to the ranch. She was careful and cautious, and slowly, gradually, she began to relax. But she thought about Lucas constantly. She thought about him when she was feeding the chickens, wondering if he had made it safely to wherever he was going. She thought about him when she was teaching Mary's eldest daughter to read, wondering what it would be like to teach his children someday. The thought always made her blush because it was presumptuous and foolish and impossible. Lucas Brennan was a drifter who had helped her escape a bad situation. The fact that he was kind and handsome and made her feel safe was irrelevant. He had probably already forgotten about her, except he had not forgotten. 6 weeks after he left, a letter arrived addressed to Sarah Ward in care of John Brennan. Olivia's hands shook as she opened it. Sarah, the letter read in neat, careful handwriting. I hope this finds you well and settled. I am currently in a town called Silver City in New Mexico Territory, doing some work for a cattle outfit down here. It is hot and dusty, and I spend most of my time wishing I was back in Wyoming where I could breathe without swallowing dirt. I have been thinking about what you said, about cages being safe until they are not. I think maybe I have been in my own cage for a long time, telling myself I was free because I kept moving. But real freedom is choosing where you want to be, not running from where you have been. I am going to finish this job, then head back to Wyoming. I talked to John before I left, and he offered me steady work if I want it. I think I might take him up on that. See you in a few months. Lucas. Olivia read the letter 5 times, trying to decode meaning in every word. He was coming back. He had been thinking about her. He had listened to what she said, and it had mattered to him. Her heart felt too big for her chest. 2 more letters came over the next months, brief but warm, updating her on his progress and asking about her life at the ranch. She wrote back carefully, telling him about Mary's children and the first snow, and how she had learned to make bread that did not taste like rocks. She did not tell him that she went to sleep every night thinking about him, or that she had memorized every line of his letters. Winter came to Wyoming hard and fast, blanketing the valley in snow and making the ranch feel like its own small world. Olivia celebrated Christmas with the Brennan family, feeling grateful and guilty in equal measure. She was safe and cared for, but she had left her father without a word beyond that brief note. Sometimes she wondered if he had mourned her, or if he had simply been angry at the disruption to his business plans. Marcus Greaves probably hated her, which was fine. She hoped he choked on that hatred. Lucas returned in early March, riding through the melting snow with his hat pulled low and a smile on his face when he saw Olivia standing on the porch. He looked thinner, weather-beaten from months on the trail, but his eyes lit up when their gazes met. "Sarah Ward," he called out, swinging down from his horse, "you are still here." "Where else would I be?" she called back, trying to sound casual even though her heart was racing. "I have a good job and a safe place. Why would I leave? No reason." He climbed the porch steps, stopping just in front of her. Up close she could see new lines around his eyes, a scar on his jaw that had not been there before. "But I am glad you stayed. I thought about you the whole ride back." "Did you?" She felt breathless, foolish. "Every day." He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and brushed a strand of hair back from her face. "I am done drifting, Olivia. I want to stay here, build something, put roots down, but only if you want that too, only if you think you could ever feel for me what I feel for you." She stared at him, her mind spinning. "You called me Olivia. That is your real name, the one your mother gave you. You should get to keep it, at least between us." His hand was still touching her face, warm and gentle. "I am in love with you. I have been since that night in our ray when you climbed down that trellis and ran toward freedom instead of cowering in fear. I know I have no right to say this. I know you just escaped one man trying to own you. I am not asking to own you. I am asking if you might want to build a life together. As partners, as equals." Tears spilled down her cheeks, but she was smiling. "I love you too. I did not want to. I told myself it was just gratitude, just the situation making me feel things that were not real. But I love you, Lucas. I love your kindness and your strength and the way you see me as a person, not as property. I love that you listened when I was afraid and that you made me feel brave. Yes, yes, I want to build a life with you." He kissed her then, and it was nothing like Marcus's brutal possessiveness. It was soft and questioning and full of promise. She wrapped her arms around his neck and kissed him back, pouring 8 months of fear and loneliness and hope into that kiss. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Lucas rested his forehead against hers. "I need to do this right," he said. "Court you proper, ask John's permission since he is sort of your guardian now, wait a respectful amount of time. How long is respectful? Maybe a year. That is too long." She kissed him again, quick and fierce. 3 months. "We already know each other, Lucas. We traveled together. We have been writing letters. We are not strangers rushing into something. 3 months and then I want to marry you." 3 months, he agreed, his smile bright as summer sun. "But I am going to court the hell out of you in that time." He kept his word. Over the next 3 months, Lucas worked the ranch with John during the day and spent his evenings with Olivia, walking along the creek or sitting on the porch talking about everything and nothing. He brought her wildflowers and taught her to shoot a rifle. She helped him mend tack and read him newspaper articles by lamplight. They kissed under the stars and made plans for the future. It was everything a courtship should be and more. Mary helped Olivia make a new dress for the wedding, a simple blue cotton that brought out her eyes. John agreed to give her away, and Mary planned a small celebration after the ceremony. The local preacher asked no questions about Sarah Ward's past, just smiled benevolently as Lucas and Olivia exchanged vows in the Brennan's parlor on a warm June evening in 1886. Olivia felt her mother's presence as she said her vows, promising to love and honor Lucas Brennan for the rest of her life. She felt her mother's approval, her mother's joy. This was what marriage was supposed to be. Not ownership, but partnership. Not fear, but trust. When Lucas kissed her as his wife, she felt the last chains of her old life fall away. She was free. She was loved. She was home. They built a small cabin on the edge of John's property, spending their first year of marriage working together to make it into a home. Lucas took on more responsibility at the ranch, proving himself invaluable to John. Olivia continued helping Mary while also taking in sewing work from the nearby town. Money was tight, but they were happy in a way that Olivia had never imagined possible. 2 years into their marriage, Olivia gave birth to a son they named Thomas, after Lucas's brother. He had his father's gray eyes and his mother's stubborn chin. Lucas cried when he held his son for the first time, pressing kisses to Olivia's forehead and whispering promises about the kind of father he would be. Nothing like his own father. Everything his brother had been to him. News occasionally filtered north from Colorado. Olivia learned that her father had indeed searched for her, had even hired investigators who tracked her as far as Denver before losing the trail. Marcus Greaves had ranted and threatened, but eventually he had married someone else, a 16-year-old girl whose father needed money. Olivia prayed for that girl and sent anonymous donations to women's aid societies in Denver, hoping somehow she could help others escape the fate she had fled. Thomas Brennan Sr. came to visit when little Thomas was 6 months old, traveling from Auray to meet his nephew and the sister-in-law he had heard so much about. He embraced Olivia warmly, thanking her for making his brother so happy. "I have never seen Lucas settled before," he said, watching his brother bounce the baby on his knee. "You are good for him." "He saved my life," Olivia said simply. "I am just trying to deserve him." "You deserve each other," Thomas said. "That is what makes it work." 2 years later, Olivia gave birth to twin girls, Emma and Grace. Lucas built an addition onto the cabin to accommodate their growing family. They were chaotic, exhausting, wonderful years. Olivia taught her children to read and ride and think for themselves. Lucas taught them to be kind and brave and honest. Together they built the kind of family neither of them had truly had growing up. When little Thomas was 7, he asked his mother about her family, why she never talked about her parents or where she came from before Wyoming. Olivia looked at Lucas across the dinner table, and he nodded slightly. Together they told their children an edited version of the truth, that Olivia had come from Colorado, that she had been in a bad situation, that Lucas had helped her escape to start a new life. The children listened with wide eyes, and when the story was finished, Emma climbed into her mother's lap. "You were very brave," she said seriously. "Your father was the brave one," Olivia corrected. "I just held on and trusted him to get me to safety." "You were both brave," Lucas said firmly. "Bravery is not the absence of fear. It is doing what needs to be done despite the fear. Your mother climbed down a trellis in the middle of the night and rode into the wilderness with a stranger because she refused to accept the life others had chosen for her. That took more courage than anything I did." Olivia reached across the table to take his hand, squeezing tight. After all these years, he still made her feel seen and valued in ways that took her breath away. The years rolled by, marked by the rhythms of ranch life. Calving in spring, haying in summer, roundups in fall, the quiet intensity of winter. Their children grew strong and confident, secure in the knowledge that they were loved. John and Mary's children grew up alongside them, and eventually John deeded part of his property to Lucas, making them full partners in the ranch operation. Olivia never returned to Colorado, though she sometimes dreamed about the mountains around Auray and the sound of Canyon Creek in spring. She heard through Thomas that her father had died of a heart attack when she was 35. She felt a complicated grief for the man he had been when she was young, and relief that he could never hurt her again. Marcus Greaves died a few years later, kicked by a horse according to the rumors. Olivia felt nothing but pity for whatever wife he had left behind. On their 20th anniversary, Lucas took Olivia riding up into the mountains behind their property. They left the children with Mary and rode until they reached a high meadow full of wildflowers, the peaks rising around them like cathedral walls. They sat together in the grass, older now but no less in love, and looked back on everything they had built. "You ever regret it?" Lucas asked. "Running away that night, leaving everything behind?" "Never," Olivia said without hesitation. "You gave me a life, Lucas. A real life where I got to choose who I wanted to be and how I wanted to live. How could I ever regret that? I am glad, because I have never regretted helping you. Best decision I ever made." He pulled her close, kissing the top of her head. "I love you, Olivia Brennan, more every day." "I love you too," she whispered against his chest. Thank you for seeing me when everyone else looked through me. Thank you for believing I was worth saving. You were always worth saving. I just helped you save yourself." They sat in that meadow until sunset, wrapped in each other's arms in 20 years of shared life. When they finally rode back to the ranch, their children came running out to greet them, and Olivia felt her heart swell with gratitude. This was her family. This was her home. This was the life she had risked everything to find, and it was more than she had ever dreamed possible. Their son Thomas grew up to be a teacher, moving to Cheyenne to run a school for children whose families could not afford tuition. The twins both married well, Emma to a doctor and Grace to a lawyer, and gave Olivia and Lucas a dozen grandchildren between them. The ranch continued to prosper, and Lucas and Olivia grew old together, their love deepening with every passing year. On their 40th anniversary, their children and grandchildren gathered at the ranch for a celebration. There was music and dancing and enough food to feed half the county. As the sun set and the lanterns were lit, Lucas pulled Olivia onto the makeshift dance floor. "Remember when I first saw you in that general store?" he said as they swayed together. "You looked so lost and scared. I knew right then I had to help you, whatever it took." "Remember when you were waiting with those horses?" she countered. "I thought you were going to change your mind, that I would get there and you would be gone. You were my last hope, Lucas, my only hope. I would never have left you there." He spun her gently, then pulled her back into his arms. "You were stuck in your cage and I had the key, simple as that." "Nothing about what we did was simple," she said, laughing. "We could have been caught 100 different ways. It was reckless and dangerous and completely insane." "Best kind of adventure," he said with a grin. "Though I am glad our children have not inherited our taste for late-night escapes and cross-country flights." "Give them time," Olivia joked. "The night is young." They danced until the stars came out, surrounded by the family they had created and the life they had built together. When Olivia looked around at all the faces lit by lantern light, every single one of them free and loved and safe, she knew that climbing down that trellis 40 years ago had been the first real choice she had ever made. Everything good in her life had flowed from that single moment of courage. Lucas squeezed her hand and she squeezed back, a conversation passing between them without words. "Thank you. I love you. Look at what we made. Look at what we became." The party continued late into the night, but eventually the guests began to drift away, and the children started carrying sleeping grandchildren to the wagons. Lucas and Olivia stood on the porch of their cabin, his arm around her shoulders, watching their family depart. "Not a bad life," Lucas said quietly. "For a drifter who did not know how to stay in one place and a woman who had to run away in the middle of the night. Not bad at all," Olivia agreed. She turned to look up at him, seeing the silver in his hair and the lines around his eyes, all the marks of 40 years together. "I would do it all again, every moment, every risk. All of it led me here to you, to this." "Me too," he said, and kissed her with the same gentleness he had shown that first time, 40 years and a lifetime ago. They went inside together as the last lanterns were extinguished, closing the door on a day of celebration and opening it on whatever tomorrow would bring. Together, always together. The way it was meant to be, the way it would always be. Two people who had found each other in the darkness and built a light that would shine long after they were gone, in the faces of their children and their children's children. All of them free, because Olivia had climbed down that trellis and Lucas had been waiting with the horses. It was the kind of love story the West was built on. Not easy or simple, but real and lasting and worth every moment of fear and uncertainty that had brought them together. They had both been running, one from a cage and one from the fear of building something that could be lost. They had found each other in the space between fear and courage, and they had built a life that proved love was the bravest thing of all. Years later, when they were both old and gray and their grandchildren asked them to tell the story again, they would sit together on that same porch and remember. The trellies, the horses, the long ride north under stars that seemed close enough to touch, the moment they realized friendship had become something deeper, the wedding in the parlor, the building of their cabin, the birth of each child, all the tiny moments that added up to a lifetime. And they would always end the story the same way. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is trust a stranger with your life, and sometimes that stranger becomes your whole world. We were both lost when we found each other, and we have been found ever since. Their story became family legend, passed down through generations. The woman who climbed out her window to escape a wedding, and the cowboy who helped her disappear into the night. The love that bloomed on a desperate flight to freedom. The life they built from nothing but courage and hope in each other. It was a story worth telling, worth remembering. A story about the Wild West and wilder hearts, about freedom and choice and the incredible power of one person seeing another person's pain and deciding to help, no matter the cost. About love that was not possession but partnership. About two people who saved each other and built something beautiful from the ashes of what they left behind. And on quiet evenings when the wind blew down from the mountains and the stars hung low over Wyoming, you could almost see them still. The young woman climbing down the trellies, her heart in her throat. The young man waiting with the horses, his future uncertain but his purpose clear. The moment they rode off together into the darkness, leaving everything behind and finding everything that mattered in each other. A love story for the ages, written in starlight and sealed with courage, living on long after the last chapter closed. Forever free, forever together, forever home.